Checking it out. All right. So, let us begin.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers, sovereign thinkers. Thank you for tuning to L3 Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful realms of planet Earth. Today's date is Saturday, November 22nd, 2025. Is episode 1918, America's Fiscal Doomsday Machine and Prince Andrew's Twisted Exploits. Before I proceed, you can follow me on multiple social media sites and podcast channels. Just type in Loki Luck number 3, Loki Luck Roman number 3, which are 3 eyes, or the Loki Luck Roman number 3 podcast. In addition, if you have any questions, comments, recommendations, and all that good stuff, whatever you do, please use decorum. Hit me via email to ll3.podcast@proton.me. If you're not doing it, go to paypal.me or cash.app/Loki Luck number 3. All right. Well, this day in history is the 62nd anniversary of the assassination on John F. Kennedy. Well, time flies. How accurate are the files and all that good stuff? Official narrative is nothing more than a monumental lie as usual, just like everything else we hear. I think we're just a bunch of morons, clowns, and zombies. Well, too bad they all can't be me. And vice versa, there are like-minded people out there as well. And it looks like the extra good amount of provinces is going to tell the Federation of Canada, Ottawa, where to go. Not being beneficial to them, spending all that money and not getting anything in return. Something like this you can say on the southern states of the U.S. had the same issue before they split. And still, people want you to sell the slavery issue. And don't get me wrong, there's some differences in that when they're trying to expand. But if you think that's the main idea, you're being swindled. But just give you one of those. It's a lot bigger than what it is, to be exact. Yeah, so I was listening to Marjorie Taylor Greene's resignation, the congresswoman from District 14 of Georgia. People call her, President Trump called her a traitor, and Giant Man himself, Congressman Randy Fine, called her anti-Semitic. I can say this. Yeah, she may have probably made some mistakes, may have jumped the gun on a few things, in my humble opinion. But her track record is a lot better than a lot of the idiots in there, whether they're Democrat or Republican. I can tell you something, Randy Fine. You're pathetic as a politician in Florida, and you'll be just as ludicrous in Washington, D.C. You're going to try to dictate to us how to think and live? Forget about it. How about just go to Dr. Slim Goodbye and do some training, for goodness sake. So you're like a walking blob, and your mind's not that straight. That's why when he made that statement on Twitter or X, claiming that he was another anti-Semite gone, that's totalitarian hyperbole from a treasonous Gino, which is a Jew in name only. Is that being a Semite? When did Jones become Semite? Randy Fine, Chuck Schumer, all those other dingleberries out there. I would love to hear a response. You can hit me on Twitter, Loki Luck number 3 on X. I want to hear your response. Tired of these people trying to sell you some recycled pus, for goodness sakes. Well, it's interesting about Marjorie Taylor Greene. I was looking through her track record, and overall, she, as a congresswoman, she has a 97% lifetime. In my opinion, she should just actually not resign in January, just finish her term. Tired of seeing people being witch hunted. I know how it is, too. I can relate. You do what's right, they want to crap on you. Like I said, she made her mistakes, too. Don't get me wrong. Choose your battles wisely. But I'm not going to cast stones at her. There's people out there that we should all praise to, and they can't even wipe their own butts. That's including President Donald Trump's endorsement, for goodness sakes. He has some lousy advisors, too, just like his predecessor, just like Obama, George W. Bush, etc. And I love it, too, when all those Trump haters, they laugh when J.D. Vance wasn't, and Donald Trump wasn't invited to the funeral of Richard Cheney. hey, they did him a favor, as far as I'm concerned. Why should I go pay homage to a man who was a globalist hack, a potential war criminal, Council of Foreign Relations member, another globalist butt lug? I wouldn't go. So, hey, I'm glad. They probably thank Liz Cheney for that, or someone else that praised Darth Vader. Pretty blasphemous as far as I'm concerned. But I'm just like having, just kicking back, and the man is here. Hey, how you doing? Hope you're doing well, sir. It's just I want to say I'm a Trump supporter. What I do? That's from the man's questions. I'm a freedom lover, sovereign thinker. If you're gonna be critical to anyone, have merit. Don't be a parrot. Have your facts. Do your research. And prove it on his face. That's how I see things, okay? And don't get me wrong, with the impeachments he had on him twice, or nothing more than bill of attainder, totally illegal, just rush right through it. Which is, if you look at the U.S. Constitution, you can understand bill of attainders are prohibited. And I digress. So, actually, I'm going to be addressing here. You're welcome. I'm going to be doing a couple articles that was published on the Activist Post. And this is by Dave Stockman. Dave Stockman on America's Fiscal Doomsday Machine and the 16th Amendment's Fatal Error. You can follow him on the International Man. If you got those Google notebooks, they will censor you, okay? I can tell you that. Well, as it reads here, the more the nation's fiscal doomsday machine cranks out even higher spending and fairly rising public debt, the more we realize that the 16th Amendment was a monumental error. And what's interesting about that, folks, under 3/4 of the state ratified it. Under 3/4, you have to have 3/4, 75% of the state and union to approve it, and never went to that threshold. And the end of its ratification in 1913 may well turn out to be the inflection point at which American democracy and capitalist prosperity took a fatal turn towards ruination. I hate when they use democracy. I love these guys, but please, a sacrilege. It need not to have happened had the legislators of that era understood the long-term ramifications of making income taxation the revenue staple of democratic governance. In the first place, of course, any practical appreciation of human nature and the dynamics of democratic governance would tell you that you should tax consumption, not income and wages, in order to defray the necessary costs of government. Well, we got all this big spending machine. Martin L. Gross warns us about in his books, Government Racket, the first one and the 2000 edition, and so forth. I know he passed, but I encourage people to check out his books. Very good. That is to say, consumption and spending by the people do not require any inducements from the state, even as too much direct tax burden upon income and wages can most surely reduce the incentives for production, investment, risk-taking, innovation, and enterprise. Still, at least in theory, a simple flat rate income tax at today's revenue levels will not be the end of the world in terms of the disincentive effects and restraint upon production and wealth creation. For instance, during 2024, the sum of employee compensation, interest and dividends, and private holders income was $21.3 trillion versus Federal Reserve income tax collections of $2.4 trillion. Interesting there, right? So A uniform levy on all types of income at 11.4% would have generated the same federal revenue as today's massive federal income tax code. Accordingly, what would amount to little more than a 1/10 teeth of Uncle Sam would not unduly impair the essential ingredients of capitalist prosperity. Unfortunately, as the income tax has evolved over the last 112 years, Washington impinged ever more heavily upon the core supply side ingredients of prosperity by tax working savings, risk-taking, invention, innovation, and enterprise. But more crucially, passage of the income tax opened the door to drastic, politically imposed redistribution of the wealth via progressive tax rates and unending loopholes and preferences for economic and social behavior that at any given moment a majority of the Congress decided to reward. Yes, socialism does exist in the United States, and both parties are responsible for it. Ain't it great? I'll continue on. Not surprisingly, therefore, what had been 27 pages of the statute in 1913 has now evolved in 2,650 pages of the IRS codes and another 9,000 pages of implementing regulations. I'll talk about war and peace on steroids, right? Self-evidently, nearly 12,000 pages of arbitrary and often obscure commands from Washington politicians and bureaucrats is the very opposite of the smooth prosperity generating workings on the unseen hand on the free market, of the free markets. All right. However, unlike the normal progressive critique claiming that the wealthy make out like bandits, owing to this 12,000 page tangled web of loopholes, preferences, and incentives, it transpires that more nearly the opposite is now the case. To wit, the actual politically tortured income tax has essentially euthanized the middle class citizenry from the true crushing burden of big government by concentrating the federal tax burden at the very top of the economic ladder. The recent release of the inflation-adjusted marginal tax brackets for 2026 provides a good reminder of how a bad idea, the progressive income tax, has been twisted, perverted, and mutilated by Congress, especially since 1981. This is to say, after decades of tax cutting by the GOP, we have now reached the point that the broad, middle, and even upper middle class no longer feels the pain of federal taxation commensurate with Washington's bloated and growing claim on national income. For the year just ended, fiscal year 2025, the total spending burden was a cool $7 trillion and amounted to 23.3% of GDP. In order to demonstrate this disconnection, we have used the 2026 federal income tax tables appended to the end of this post to calculate the share of household income by federal income taxes and also by employee share of payroll taxes at intervals from the median income household to the top 1%. But first, it should be noted that among 154 million income tax filers in 2022, fully 31 or 48 million owed zero federal income taxes due to the huge standard of deduction of $32,200 for joint returns plus another $2,200 of direct tax credits for each child 18 and under, and another $12 million paid less than $1,000 after all current day deductions and credits. In all, fully 122 million households pay a lesser percent of their gross income in federal taxes than the 23.3% of federal spending share of national income. And for the vast bulk of the population, the burden is far, far less. This is possible, of course, only because 25% of more of the federal spending is being habitually borrowed from future generations at 6% GDP deficits currently, and 65% of federal income taxes are paid by the top of the 7% of households. This is to say, due what has primarily been GOP tax policy over recent decades, the standard deduction and child tax credits have been pushed sky high, while marginal rate brackets at the middle and lower end of the income ladder have been pushed but very low, consistent with supply side doctrine. Accordingly, middle-class taxpayers have exceedingly low average tax rates relative to Uncle Sam's voracious helping of national income. For example, based on the new tax tables for 2026, which reflect the changes in Trump's OBBBA, considered a two-earner household with two children under 18 using the standard deduction and bringing home wage and salary income equal to the median household income of about $85,000. That household would have $52,800 of taxable income after the standard deduction of $32,200 and would owe 10% on the first $24,800 of the taxable income and a 12% marginal on the balance rate, thereby generating an income tax liability of $5,840 or just 7% of gross income. But the latter would be reduced by $4,400 owing to two child credits of each $2,200. This means that the median household's net federal income tax payment would amount to just $1,440. So we do mean that GOP tax policy, low marginal rates for the supply siders and a big standard deductions and generous child credits for the pro-family natalist factions has essentially exempt the middle class from federal income taxes. After all, Uncle Sam's extraction of 1.7% from an $85,000 income in 2026 would roughly equivalent to a weekend at Disney World. That's right. Aside from a few adjustments for single households and childless families that do not materially impact the analysis, the bottom line is this: upwards of 66 million U.S. households of the median income and below pay less than 2% in federal income taxes to a Leviathan on the banks of the Potomac that devours nearly 1/4 of the GDP. To be sure, this two-earner household will also pay a substantial amount to Uncle Sam for the employee share of OASDHI payroll taxes, which currently amounts to 7.65%, but unlike the case of income taxes, much of the public has been bamboozled into believing that Social Security withholding is a form of insurance premium for their retirement fund, and therefore is not quite as onerous as income taxes, which goes to the bottomless pit of the federal budget. That's nonsense, of course, because there are no real assets in the Social Security Trust Fund. Intra-governmental IOUs, these payroll levies, are actually just a layer of taxation on labor income. Still, even when you aggregate income and the employee share the payroll taxes for this $85,000 median income household, total federal taxes under 2026 schedule would come to $7,943 of just 9.3% gross income. Yet, that's the true evil of the 16th Amendment. It has been twisted into a pretzel by modern GOP tax and fiscal policy. The 2026 tax schedule is telling households at the dead center of the income distribution that they can have 23.3% of the GDP government for a 9.3% of income change. Stated differently, they'll be getting big government on the Potomac on sale at 60% off. The summary of tax burden at 1.0 times median or 85% per annum. It gives a whole rundown here, payroll taxes and all that. So I'm going to skip all that. So pretty interesting stuff. Moreover, the case is not above half of it as you move up to the income ladder from the median. The same outcomes hold until you reach the tippy top of the distribution. For instance, in the case of the same two earners, two child standard deduction using withhold with a gross income at 2 times of the median of $107,000, taxable income would be $137,880. So after paying 11.6% of the first $100,000 of taxable income, it would pay at 22% marginal bracket on the balance of $37,000. Accordingly, its federal income tax liability would total $19,740, less the $4,400 of child tax credits. Again, actual income tax payments to Uncle Sam of $15,340 would compute to just 9% of gross income. This is to say, the current twisted federal income tax would levy a single-digit average rate on a household with $170,000 per year in a wage and salary income. Also, again, when you add the payroll tax, which is not capped until $176,000 for each of the two earners, the 7.65% levy would add another $13,005 of federal extraction. Still, combined income and payroll taxes burden in this case would amount to $28,345 or 16.7% income. And yet, yet again, no cigar. Even at 2 times the median income, a representative wage earning family does not come close to carry 23.3% of the weight of what Milton Friedman properly called the true tax burden, that is the pay me now or pay me later spending share of national tax income. And it gives you a whole rate down here on this stuff. So it's very interesting here indeed. But I'll continue. I'll just bypass all that. Don't worry. I'll leave the footnotes when I publish this episode of the so you can read it for yourselves on these rates. But thus, you must climb up far from the income ladder to find a taxpayer that pays 23.3% share of its gross income under the stipulated but typical condition of 2 earners, 2 kids, and the standard deduction. In fact, only when you get 4 times the median of $340,000 of gross income do you break even. In case the household's $307,800 of income after the standard deduction would fall in the 24% bracket. Accordingly, a liability of $35,932 of the first $211,400, 17%, and $23,146 on the balance, 24%, would generate a blended liability of $54,668 after the child react credits, or 16.1% of the gross income total. Only after adding in $26,010 of payroll taxes do you get a total of federal tax payments of $80,678 or 23.7% gross income. Yes, there are a lot of numbers in this article. It is very interesting indeed, but it's just nuts, on this. But I'll just bypass a lot of the stuff here. The truth of the matter is that the best spawn of the 16th Amendment, the current mangled federal tax income tax, is utterly incompatible with today's massive welfare state and warfare state spending enterprises. The income tax places the overwhelming burden of tax collection on the 1% and 5% of America's households when only the pain of roughly proportionate taxation has a prayer of rebalancing the nation's fiscal politics as between the spenders and the payers. Moreover, the payroll tax is almost as bad, given that it heavily taxes workers and employers' labor costs at a time when the U.S. has already priced itself out of the global markets, owing the pro-inflation policies of the Fed. All hail to fiat currency. Woo! Hip, hip, hooray. Any questions? I recommend folks out there to study the fall of the Reichsmark in Weimar Republic of Germany during the 1920s. Accordingly, there is only one real solution that might stand a chance of staunching the nation's headlong rush to a fiscal disaster, yet also not exaggerate the economic problem of high-cost labor in the U.S. at all levels of the economy, to wit, replace both income tax and the payroll tax with a national consumption tax, which would require $1.4 trillion of annual revenue replacement. In addition, the federal deficit posted at $2.4 trillion during fiscal year 2025, which would require an additional $1.2 trillion revenue increase if the budget were to be balanced on a 50-50 basis between revenue increases and $1.2 trillion of spending cuts, with the latter distributed roughly evenly between defense cuts and entitlement reforms and means testing. In short, on a fiscal 2025 basis, a true escape from the disaster of the current income tax and payroll taxes would require a consumption tax of about $5.3 trillion, which in turn would amount to 25% of personal consumption expenditures, PCE, of $21.1 trillion during the fiscal year just completed. To be sure, that sounds like a tall, if not impossible order, but here's the thing. There's not a snowball chance in the hot place that the current mangled income tax and economically oppressive payroll tax can be configured to bring the Friedmanite cost of government to America 133 million households in a manner that actually results in less spending and less buildup on the nation's runaway public debt. In fact, the only way to tame the Leviathan on the Potomac is to ensure that every time a household buys $400 of groceries or $400 of home decor items via Amazon or $400 of rides and refreshments at a theme park, they also pay an added $100 each time for Washington's welfare state, and endless pork barrel. The public experiencing that pain over and over again is the only way that spending can be curtailed, a fiscal catastrophe avoided. Editor's note: if you read this far, you understand just how dangerously close America is to the fiscal breaking point, and why the same forces David Stockham warned about could soon trigger the greatest financial upheaval of our time. To prepare for what to come next, there's an urgent report. You can look it up, Guide to Surviving and Thriving During an Economic Collapse. You get all the information there. Inside, you'll learn practical steps to protect your wealth, preserve your freedom, position yourself on the right side of history when the fiscal doomsday machine creates an enormous catastrophe. And he's absolutely correct. And I always recommend folks, you should always learn to decentralize a lot more. And that, to me, that's that's very important. And what we see right now is just the Rothschilds want to benefit the most, and that's why I always renounce these things. However, it's keep things basic. That's the way to do it. Don't listen to these other idiots. I wouldn't live in luxurious pigeonholes, even if I was a multimillionaire. So that's just my thing. But you always gotta do your own journeys and do right. So I'm gonna do one more here. This came from Activist Post again, but originally was from The Gray Zone, written by Kit Claren Burgley. The intel scandal behind Prince Andrew's twisted Epstein exploits. In an interview with the Gray Zone author Andrew Lonnie details shock findings of his research into Prince Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, describing Andrew as his Super Bowl trophy. Epstein would use Prince for intel, which he passed to foreign spy agencies. Lonnie says further revelations threaten to bury the royal family. Prince Andrew's decades-long relationship with Jeffrey Epstein was earlier, longer, and far more intimate than anyone has previously admitted. Historian Andrew Lonnie told the Gray Zone their friendship was so depraved that even Epstein, self-proclaimed king of kink, was shocked by Prince's sexual appetites, according to Lonnie's new book entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York. Based on years of research in BBC archives, interviews, and leaked emails, Lonnie's investigation provides a chilling portrait of a man shielded by royal privilege, addicted to sex from childhood, and ultimately undone by his alliance with the world's most notorious pedophile. The historian reveals that Epstein not only supplied Andrew with a steady stream of underage girls, but also gathered intelligence from the prince and doubtfully passed it along to Mossad and other spy agencies. Interesting there. So let's just check this out. The prince was a useful idiot who gave Epstein respectably and access to political leaders and business opportunities. Lonnie explained to the Gray Zone. Meanwhile, Epstein offered Andrew an opportunity to join the super rich and enjoy a lifestyle which he had long aspired, an endless supply of women, a chance to make lots of money, and someone who would bankroll his lavish lifestyle as settled Sarah Ferguson's debts. Lonnie revealed that Epstein was able to gather a steady flow, sensitive intelligence from Andrew, including potential blackmail material, which he could hawk to foreign governments. Epstein's one-time mentor, the serial fraudster Stephen Hoffenberg, echoed this account, claiming Epstein's referred to Andrew as the Super Bowl trophy, while the British royal unwittingly spied on Epstein's behalf. He simultaneously compromised himself, making him into a perfect tool. For much of his life, Andrew enjoyed an astonishing level of protection and indulgence from his mother, Queen Elizabeth. A former worker interviewed by Australian outlet divulged that royal staffers were terrified by Prince's impunity and largely avoided standing up to his compulsive bullying because Her Majesty almost always backed him, and he fully exploited that. Yep, so he was a privileged chump. I continue on. Lonnie told the Gray Zone Andrews explosive tantrums at Buckingham Palace, which reduced some targets to tears, were a virtually daily occurrence. So he was a glamour boy, right? A source close to Andrew revealed to Lonnie that the prince began exhibiting unusual sexual tendencies when he was only 8 years old. The problem only worsened when Andrew lost his virginity at the age of 11 after a friend's father hired 2 escorts for the boys. Andrew reportedly informed the source that by the time he was 13, he had already slept with over half a dozen girls, leading the source to conclude that the prince had been a victim of sexual abuse at a very young age. Thanks to Andrew and Epstein, the cycle of abuse allegedly continued with a number of young girls, most notably Virginia Giuffre. When her allegations against Prince became public in 2015, a BBC team secretly traveled across the U.S., reviewing police files while interviewing the pair's victims at length. Along the way, they unearthed emails between Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell discussing Giuffre. The email offers no indication either were unaware of Giuffre or any sense her allegations were bogus. Lonnie says the BBC teams told investigators told him instead of Andrew and Maxwell worked together to build a dossier about Virginia Giuffre to leak to the media. In other words, the pair colluded to smear one of their victims in the court of public opinion before legal action could be initiated. When a suit was finally initiated on her behalf, Andrew paid out handsomely rather than face scrutiny. Lonnie believes full disclosure of Andrew's involvement with Epstein's could permanently sink the House of Windsor. Sorry about that. A former Buckingham Palace staffer told him they'd never be able to back from it as the resulting scandal would bury them for good. Lonnie sourced caution if the unconditional truth is ever released, the British public would try to impeach the royal family. After all, many of Andrew's wrongdoings were done on the British taxpayers tab. And there's a little thing on tweet. Never forget that Prince Andrew invited his friends, Jeffrey Epstein, to relax at the porch of the Queen's log cabin. Andrew's sexual depravity shocks even Epstein. Canadian journalist Ian Halperin was the only reporter to interview Epstein at length before the financier's death. He provided Lonnie with exclusive access to his records. They showed Epstein was surprisingly candid about his predilection of underage girls, to the extent of openly arguing pedophilia should be decriminalized. Along the way, the pedophile offered a number of explosive revelations about Andrew, who he described as his closest friend in the world. In one email, Epstein instead, he and Andrew were very similar, as they were both serial sex addicts who'd even share the same women. Andrew was the only person I have met who was more obsessed with pussy than me. Excuse my language. That's how it says here. He attested. Based on reports Epstein received from their mutual sexual conquest, Andrew was the most perverted animal in the bedroom. He wrote, Epstein expressed awe at the degeneracy of Andrew, who he said possessed the dirtiest mind I ever seen, concluding he likes to engage in stuff that's even kinky to me, and I'm the king of kink. Lonnie also provides evidence that the depraved duo crossed paths far earlier than is claimed by Andrew. According to a statement by the prince after Epstein's death, he insisted they met in 1999 and subsequently saw each other probably no more than once or twice a year. In reality, Andrew's private secretary places the start of the relationship in the early 1900s. Lonnie explained 50 logs from Epstein's private jet, nicknamed the Lolita Express, revealed that Andrew's occasional partner, Sarah Ferguson, traveled on the aircraft with her children as early as April 1998. Wow. By 2000, the royal had become a fixture at elite stateside social events hosted by Epstein's and Ghislaine Maxwell, the publishing heiress, who met Andrew during the 1980s at Oxford University. As their friendship developed, Andrew and Ferguson often stayed at Epstein's patio, New York and Florida homes. These trips have largely been concealed from the public, which is perhaps understandable given the purpose of his visits. Whenever Andrew was in town, I'd be picking up young girls who are essentially prostitutes. Epstein personal driver Ivan Navikov recalled to Lonnie, the one time I drove him and two young girls around 18 to the Gavenvert Hotel in the meatpacking district. Both girls were doing lines of cocaine. Prince Andrew was making out with one of them. All the while, Epstein and Maxwell were insinuating themselves into the top echelons of the British aristocracy. According to the one now deleted British media report, Andrew invited Epstein and Maxwell to attend events at Windsor Castle and Sardingham in 2001, including Queen Elizabeth II's 74th birthday that August. The article, which has been scrubbed from London's Evening Standard website, quoted a friend from Ferguson as saying Andrew's lewdness was so undisguised that he travels abroad with his own message mattress. According to Evening Standards, this is the very manipulative Maxwell introduced Andrew to a sex aid entrepreneur at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago. The same piece described Andrew traveling around Phuket, Thailand, with Maxwell, frequenting sex bars in the area's red light district and visiting Los Angeles with his friends and self-confessed drug dealer Brett Livingstone Strong. During this time, Andrew was apparently so infatuated with Epstein and his clique that he opted to stay at the pedophile's Miami Beach mansion rather than attend his daughter's Eugene's 12th birthday party at Disneyland Paris, Lonnie reveals. Wow. Andrew's fall from grace. In May 2007, Epstein began negotiating an unusually lenient plea deal with the Florida authorities after local police uncovered a trove of evidence implicating the financier in a national sex trafficking conspiracy. Finally, English language media began scrutinizing the potentially pedophilic implications of the financier's bond with Prince Andrew for the first time. Another since deleted Evening Standard report on their friendship noted Epstein's Florida's mansion was filled with pictures of new girls with two cameras found hidden in clocks. The net significantly tightened in December 2014 when lawyers filed court papers in Florida alleging Andrew was one of the semi-prominent figures who raped Virginia Giuffre at Epstein's arrangement. The pair purportedly had sex in London, New York, and on Epstein's private island, Little St. James. In the latter case, Giuffre claimed to have been solved in a disgusting orgy with Andrew Epstein and multiple girls, who all appear to be under age of 18. The filing also alleged Andrew had lobbied on Epstein's behalf after his arrest, working to ensure he received a light sentence. Epstein repaid the favor by clearing Sarah Ferguson's substantial debt. British media reacted with shock. Prince Andrew may have been secretly filmed with underage girl he is alleged to have abused, blared one mainstream headline. That day, seemingly frantic, Andrew emailed Maxwell, let me know when we could talk. Got some specific questions to ask you about Virginia Roberts. Buckingham Palace issued a firm denial, stating any suggestion of impropriety by Andrew with underage minors is categorically untrue. That he emphatically denied the Duke of York had any form of sexual conduct or relationship with Virginia Roberts until Epstein's death. The British media seemingly accepted the royal line, but Andrew's now notorious November 2019 Newsnight interview revived public suspicions and ignited a new wave of scrutiny. Over the course of an hour-long grilling, the prince offered a series of preposterous excuses for his friendship with Epstein while failing to credibly explain his time with Godfrey. For example, he claimed her account of him sweating profusely while they danced together at a London nightclub couldn't be true, as he was unable to sweat at all because he suffered scientifically implausible adrenaline overdose during the Falklands War. Next, Andrew attempted to justify a 4-day 2010 visit to Epstein in New York, during which paparazzi documented a young woman leaving his townhouse and a friendly walk he enjoyed with the prince through Central Park. The tweet below incorrectly dates the footage from 2011. It was filmed December 6, 2010. And I've seen the video, so you can see Prince Andrew's head could be picked out of the door. In his news site interview, Andrew claimed he initiated the meeting to break off ties with the financier following his conviction of said trafficking offenses. He insisted that he felt the need to end their connection in person due to his tendencies to be honorable, but struggled to explain why this necessitated a 4-night long stay to replete with a dinner party in his personal honor. The prince claimed he opted to stay at Epstein's mansion as it was convenient, apparently overlooking the British consulate and numerous upmarket hotels, which could provide an alternative to staying with a convicted sex offender. Furor over Andrew's performance erupted as soon as Andrew interview was broadcast, with one royal observer dubbing it nuclear explosion level bad, yet the prince was initially satisfied with this public self-immolation. The Guardian reported at the time that Andrew was so pleased with how things had gone that he gave the news site team a tour of the palace afterwards. Andrew's British state protection crumbles. Days after the disastrous interview, Andrew's ex-girlfriend disputed his account of the 2010 visit with Epstein, stating that the prince's main purpose was to determine whether the financier had any dirt on him. The pair reportedly also discussed securing $200 million funding for mysterious energy company Aria Petroleum, prompting Epstein to inform close contacts at J.P. Morgan that the prince sought to represent the interests of a Chinese commercial entity. From this point on, Andrew withdrew from public life under pressure from British Army apparatus. He was stripped of his military awards and decorations. Charities distanced themselves from the royal, while polls indicated a majority of Britons believe he should be extradited to the U.S. to face questioning. In May 2020, Andrew permanently resigned all his public roles over his Epstein connections. In the meantime, pressure began building in the U.S. for the prince to speak to Godfrey's lawyers and federal investigators. In his news site interview, subsequent official statements, Andrew claimed he was to assist with any investigation into Epstein's abuse, but the American prosecutor who led investigations into the financier at his associates in New York. Jeffrey Berman reported he was repeatedly stonewalled by Buckingham Palace. Contacting royal lawyers was difficult enough in the first place, and he described their communications as how quickly devolved into a never-ending series of questions. And I'm sorry, folks, if it's taking so long. Please forgive me. What kind of interview will it be? Are there any protections? Is there this? Is there that? And where do you want to take place? Berman recalled, it was an endless email exchange. It was clear we are getting the runaround. He was not going to sit down for an interview with us. Finally, Berman asked the State Department to dispatch a mutual legal assistance treaty, or MLAT, M-L-A-T, request to British police demanding an interview with the prince. U.S. prosecutors almost always got what he asked. When we put in MLAT request, Berman recalled, but that was not that's not what happened with Prince Andrew. We got absolutely nowhere. We were protecting him. I assumed someone was. Andrew state level protection began to dissolve. However, after a December 2020 investigation by the Daily Mail into Guthrie's claim that Andrew had sex with her when she was just 17, the abolists for the dates in question had been incinerated. In August 2021, Guthrie's lawyer filed suit against Andrew in U.S. court for sexual assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The action raised the prospect of Andrew giving sworn testimony proving his inability to sweat on the witness stand. Members of the royal family, including Ferguson and their daughters, Princess Beatrice and Eugene, also face a threat of grilling under oath. Rather go to court. The House Windsor settled for much as $16.3 million. Andrew Prince no more as scandals proliferate. For the first time, Buckingham Palace began firmly distance itself from Andrew. As Lonnie recorded, the media was informed that the Queen would no longer bankroll his legal fees after a lifetime of protecting her son from the consequences of his excesses. Fear of further damaging admissions may have motivated the monarch's decision. Those fears were well-founded, as Lonnie revealed that Andrew emailed Epstein in February 2011, months after claiming to have cut off all contact with the financier following their 4-day 2010 farewell summit in New York. In that email, Andrew promised to keep close in touch, stating, we are in this together and we'll have to rise above it, and promising we'll play some more soon. That same year, Sarah Ferguson expressed her affinity and gratitude to Epstein in a separate covert email exchange. Sources suggest to Lonnie that Epstein has supplied her with hundreds of thousands of dollars in far excess of the £15,000 she claimed to receive from the serial sex abuser. In 2011 interview, Ferguson said having anything to do with Epstein had been a gigantic error of judgment on her part. She added, of her pedophilia and any sexual abuse of children, what he did was wrong, and he was rightly jailed. Shortly after he contacted Epstein, claiming she did not, absolutely not, say the P word about you. Ferguson apologized for letting him down. You have always been steadfast, generous, and a supreme friend to my family. This October 30th, as fervor over Epstein's activities engulfed the Trump administration, Buckingham Palace issued a shock declaration. Prince Andrew will be stripped of his titles, honors, and stately home, and now simply be known as the Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, in effect excommunicated from the British royal family for life. While no formal explanation of the unprecedented move was provided, it was clear they were determined to cleanse Epstein's stain from their house. These censures are deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him. The royal statement reads, Their Majesties wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of all forms of abuse. But Andrew erasure from the spotlight, termination of this assorted patronage, and curtailment of public duties may have come too late after years of alienating between silence over sexual abuse or flatly denying allegations. Buckingham Palace faces the threat of further disclosures as Lonnie makes it clear in his newly released book entitled New Details of Prince's Perversion Could Discredit the Royal Family for Good. Oh my goodness. Well, how I see it, when you run it like some orgy machine, it is insane. So it just really dawns on me the most on what the hell's going on. And I do remember reading stuff about this many years ago. Controversies of Buckingham Palace. I remember examining an article about sex scandals in Essex with people in the council and so forth. This is just one, I could say, detrimented society. Doesn't matter where you're at. And maybe it doesn't matter what your belief system is. A lot of them don't want to see children be hurt and young folks. And what happened to Prince Andrew, even from an early age, he's been distorted for a very long time. I'm not defending his actions either. That's why we gotta destroy these sons of bitches one way or the other, because there's a lot of evil people out there and they don't give a damn about any of us. This is why you never fall for material things. Don't entrap yourselves. Always remain vigilant. We've been living in a dangerous world for a very long time. We can't take things for granted. One thing I got to say about with Mr. Andrew, he was just another pawn of the machine. It has to be destroyed one way or the other. More exposure, the better. Let these people, whoever's involved, be wear nothing at all. Bare ass naked. Well, I want to be done. That will be it. Mary Stanley. Hello, Mayor Stanley. All right, well, that will be it. I thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share throughout your social media networks. I know it's pretty long. And if you want to contact me, go to ll3.podcast@proton.me. Questions, comments, all that good stuff. Always use decorum. I'll leave the articles of this episode when I publish it. And if you want to donate, go to PayPal to me or cash.app/Lucas3. If you want to support the International Man and the Gray Zone activist post, that'd be very cool. When you read, please observe responsibly. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that the demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love. May your guardian spirits be with you.